Hello there, folks. Cranky Cuber here again with the next installment in the saga of the Moritz Klein and Erica Sense DIY modular synth. Before I begin, I have one favor to ask. If you're enjoying this series, please smash that like button, and if you want, leave me a comment and let me know you're watching. We all have to appease the algorithm to get our videos in front of people, so any help you can give me would be much appreciated. Today we're going to talk about the noise sample and hold module in the kit. This module has a few utilities on it. It has 3 different noise sources, it has a sample and hold function, and it has a slew function. Let's talk about noise. And we'll start with white noise, which is just a random audio signal where all the audible frequencies are equally likely to be present at any given instant. You've heard white noise if you've ever manually tuned a radio or television and there wasn't a signal present. So I've got the spectrum and the noise signals voltage on this scope. The spectrum is at the top and the voltage is at the bottom. As you can see, the signal has all frequencies represented for the most part. I'll turn up the volume so you can hear it too. This module also produces pink and blue noise. Here's the spectrum and waveform for pink noise. As you can see, the pink noise emphasizes the lower frequencies more than the higher frequencies. And here's a listen. Now, here's the spectrum and waveform for blue noise, which is emphasizing the higher frequencies more than the lower frequencies, and sounds like this. Sample and hold looks at an input signal, measures its voltage, or samples it, and sends that voltage level to the output and holds it until it's time for the next sample, and then does it all over again. We can vary how much time is between the samples with a rate control. The higher the rate, the faster the output changes. We can use the slew feature to influence how fast the voltages change at each sample. With no slew, we're essentially outputting square waves with varying amplitudes, but where the values step from one level to the next very quickly. If we add slew, though, we make the output signal change more slowly, which smooths out the signal. If we're using it to control the pitch of an oscillator, we'll hear more gliding between pitches than we would without slew. What do we use it for? Well, let's get it built, and I'll show you. So, got the module built. It's in the case here where it goes. We're running out of empty slots in the case, so we're going to be done with this series soon. This VCO, the reason it's here is because it can produce a sine wave, and I'm going to need a sine wave later because I don't have anything else on here that generates a sine wave. We've talked about what it can do, but let's listen and kind of look at what it can do. Let's turn it on, and we'll patch our white noise to our output. Let's take a listen. Yep, that's white noise. That is the sound of all frequencies happening all the time at random. So let's patch the pink noise and take a listen to that. So that's basically white noise with the higher frequencies attenuated more and more as they get higher. It's got a little bit of a lower pitch to it. All right, now let's patch the blue noise. We turn this up. So that's essentially white noise with the lower frequencies attenuated. It sounds more like a hiss to me. So with just a noise and a sine wave, we can make a snare. So let's do that. What I've got here is I've got the VCO patched into our top VCA, and I have that output patched into the output mixer. I have white noise patched into the bottom VCA, and I have that output patched into the output mixer. I'm controlling both of these VCAs with an envelope over here with a small sustain, decays at about 3 o'clock, and attack is very short. On top of that, I'm also controlling the 1 volt per octave with this other envelope, and I'm triggering both envelopes with my gate generator here on my sequencer. What this should do is this envelope will cause this pitch to fall after being struck, and this envelope will open up the VCAs to hear the sound and shape it. So let's try it out. This should be a snare. That's not bad. We can make the snare part a little bit louder. There's another thing we can do. We can give it slightly different noise. So we'll try pink noise. What's that do? Oh, I bet we're going to use pink noise to make claps too. Nice. And then if we put blue noise in, we get a little different sound. Now we can go back to white noise, and we could vary the pitch that we're tuned to on the VCO. And so we could tune our snare to whatever we want, and we can make toms. If we just turn the white noise off, that's a pretty nice tom. So we'll take that as our snare, turn our noise back up, and there you go. We got a snare drum. So we can also use blue noise to make a hi-hat. I've got this patch now, so I'm using blue noise going to the VCA. I'm using this envelope to open and close the VCA, and I've got the VCA going into the output, and we've got our trigger here. So I'm setting sustain at about 1030. I'm setting my decay at about 830, and attack is about the same, maybe a little lower. And here's what we get. Okay, that's a pretty good closed hi-hat sound. Yeah, I like that fine. We can mess around with this stuff and make it sound different, but I'll leave that as an exercise to the viewer. You should get the idea about noise now, at least as a sound source. As a source of random voltage, I have more to show you. So what is this sample and hold thing? We're going to get the oscilloscope involved now. So let's take a look at what this thing does if we feed it a slow sine wave. All right. Got our sine wave going in, and we'll plug into the sample and hold out. Okay, so what we've got here is, you see how the steps are basically just following the shape of the sine? That's because the sine wave is slow moving and our samples are slow. What's cool is if we sample more often, turn it up to about here, well, our steps get closer together, but you'll notice it starts to smooth out and look like the sine wave more. And if I run that all the way up, there's about 3/4. You see how it's starting to smooth out? And if I turn it all the way up so we're sampling all the time, it almost just follows the sine wave perfectly. I want to put it in the middle now. I want to speed up the sine wave and see what we get now. It's still basically following the shape. Again, even if we're going this fast, if we increase the sample rate, our wave starts to look just like. So that's pretty cool. Okay, so sample and hold, pretty simple concept at this point. What if we feed it a random signal? Could we get random voltage out? Of course we can. Well, let's do that. So the yellow trace is noise. Okay, that's noise. The blue trace is the sampled output. What can we do with this sampled output? I don't know, we could use it to modulate something. What if we modulated the 1 volt per octave on our VCO? What would that sound like? Well, let's turn this up and listen to it. That's basically random notes being played on the VCO. You can make the pitches faster. If we go up to about here, and then we could go really fast with it. And it turns out that the sampler goes kind of up into the audio range, so get ready for this. That's essentially filtered noise. It's sampling so quickly that it's just making a new kind of noise. A lot of possibilities here with this thing, which is kind of cool. It's basically a random pitch sequencer with the randomness coming from a bunch of white noise. All right, so what is this slew thing? Let's take this out and put it in the slew output. So the sample and hold output is normaled to the slew input here. So whatever's coming out here will be going in here. Well, we can take our output from slew instead of from sample and hold, and then we can apply the slew potentiometer to increase the amount of slew. What we have here is we have sharp changes in voltage here. So as you remember, that sounds like this. If we turn the slew up, now we get curved edges, and that sounds like this. Well, what we've done is we've rounded the edges. And so instead of having sharp steps, we're moving up to it and down to it we have a little bit of a corner on each of them when we have the decay, but it's still a lot smoother. You could use this signal to modulate a filter, opening and closing it, and giving subtle changes over time that aren't necessarily tied to the rhythm or anything. You could just have an evolving sound where the filter just opens and closes naturally with this random signal, and it makes it sound more organic. There's like a bunch of things that you can use smooth random voltage for, and that's just, one suggestion. There are still some weirdnesses about this module that I don't completely understand. So let me give you a for instance. This input is marked CVN, okay? To me, that says, oh, control voltage. We have a CV level, so we got an attenuator. Obviously, this CVN is used to modulate the rate, right? Incorrect. After I had it put together and I tried to work with it, I wasn't getting anything to work the way it seemed like it ought to, and that's when I figured out that this is not CVN. This is just the input signal. Whatever you put in here is what gets sampled. Right now, white is normal to it, but you could plug any of these or any other signal in here like we did earlier and sample and hold on it. I would have just marked it input, and I would have marked this level. The other thing is this clock input. I tried to do a bunch of stuff with the clock input, but no matter what kind of signal I put in there, whether it's a sync signal from here or whether I just run a square wave in from this VCO, it will clock it and the LED will be syncing at the right rate, but sample and hold and slew out just nothing comes out. I'm gonna have to put the module under a microscope and see if I have a solder bridge, but it also might be that my clock signal I'm putting in there is not strong enough. I was watching Moritz's video about this module earlier, and he mentioned that it needed a strong clock because there's a diode in the circuit that needs to be forced open. We'll have to see. I'll let you know in a future video. When I first started working on this video, I quite honestly had no idea what a sample and hold module actually was, other than you can get random voltage from it. And when I sat down to try to play with it, I struggled to make it do anything interesting because I didn't understand how it worked. But it was a super fun process to hook it up to the scope and figure it out and play with it to get more insight, and also to figure out what I should do for demoing it in this video. Hopefully I've given you some ideas for what you can use a noise sample and hold module for, and also a little bit of insight into this particular module. I'll sort out the deal with the clock input and update you all in a future video. Speaking of future videos, next up is the kit's wave folder, which is also a pretty cool module that I'm slightly mystified by, but we'll figure it out. So with all that said, I think that's enough for one video. Thank you for watching, and I'll catch you at the next one. Cheers.